Hey. Welcome to episode 232 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and the title of this episode is called The Multi-Dimensionalist. And you'll see many dimensions of my guest when I bring him on. And all of us have different dimensions, different hats we wear, a lot of different things going on. And in honor of that, I'm wearing a different shirt than usual for those who watch the podcast routinely. Sometimes it's fun just to explore the minor things and take a step, no matter how small, and do something different. Like this sure feels good. Well, anyway, I'm excited to tell you more about our guest today, but first this.
Today's guest, Erik Paparozzi.
Hey, welcome back to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Once Erik Paparozzi, okay, back up. Let me tell you a little bit more about Erik. Once Erik Paparozzi embraced his love of music and dedicated himself to honing his talents as a multi-instrumentalist, his entire life changed. Over the course of 1 year, he went from playing in a karaoke band, which he loved, to opening for Gnarls Barkley and the Flaming Lips. As the band leader and multi-instrumentalist for K-Mart, he's toured the world several times over. He's a founding member of Lizard Music and has worked with Lana Del Ray, Neil Young, Eric Idle of Monty Python, Tom Heidecker, Harper Simon, who is Paul Simon's son, Denny Lane, Neil Hamburger, and he's produced the music for RuPaul's Drag Race. Yes, his is an extraordinary story. But what struck me most when I met Erik at a Malibu wine mixer earlier this year, or last year actually, last November, is that he's much more apt to want to talk about how his brother, who experiences autism, has finally discovered a way to communicate the brilliance inside of himself after a lifetime of being unable to participate in anything more than simple communication. Erik also spoke at length about a trip he took with his 11-year-old daughter and his father to visit 68 beloved family members in a small Italian village. He also mentions managing a K-Mart portrait studio, working in the field of social services, and being in New York City during 9/11. It was only after we'd covered a wide variety of topics that Erik was willing to talk about his musical accomplishments. Speaking to him, I get a renewed sense for life's many dimensions. Please welcome Erik Paparozzi to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. Woo! Hey, Erik.
Thank you. Wow, what an intro.
Thanks so much for being here.
And I love that I'm episode 232. I'm a fan of palindromes, so I like that I'm episode 232. It's the same backwards and forwards, and it's, it's just another dimension that I inhabit.
That's interesting how sometimes unexpected gifts come into our lives. Like, I didn't know you were a fan of palindromes, and I mean, even if I had known that, you get the episode number you get, but suddenly this little unexpected thing.
I love it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of taking little gifts where I can get them, that just make me feel connected to the world we're in, whatever the heck this is.
What are the small gifts you love to notice?
Oh, I mean, it can be just as simple as thinking of a word and then a truck drives by and that word is on the truck or something. I'm just I don't know what it means or where it's going, and I know people who actually get so obsessive over coincidences that it kind of drives them crazy. I'm not that bad, but I like that stuff. And actually, here's a good one. I was lucky enough to master one of the albums that I produced. Mastering is like the final stage before you print it up. I mastered it at Abbey Road Studios, which is where the Beatles recorded everything. The Pink Floyd did Dark Side of the Moon. The Star Wars soundtrack was done there. This place is a vortex in and of itself.
Wow.
And I had gone 2018 or so. And no, it must have been 19, because I went there and I decided to do a test walk from my hotel to the studio, because I flew in, and on that day I thought, I don't want to be guessing tomorrow. Let me just do a test run to make sure I know where I'm going from my hotel. And are you familiar with the image of the cover of Abbey Road, the Beatles' Abbey Road?
Yeah, they are crossing in the crosswalk.
Yeah, they're crossing the street, and it's a blue sky, and there's trees on the side, and there's parked cars. And so anyway, I'm walking and I'm kind of looking at my phone, I'm looking at the maps, and then I look up and I go, oh my God, like, wow, that is uncanny. Like, the view I had was it was the exact cover of that record cover. So, okay, that's just like a little thought I had that day. I go back to my hotel room and I'm laying in bed that night, and I was on Instagram and I was following a guy who worked with the Beatles, and he goes, on this day 50 years ago, the cover to the iconic Beatles Abbey Road cover was taken. So like, I was there 50 years to the day, and then I was seeing it and it was exactly the same. And I don't know, again, like, does it really mean anything? No, it just makes me feel like alive, like I'm on the right path, when those things happen. Like being episode 232. I was meant to be here, it turns out.
That's wonderful. And when we spoke on Zoom, what you started to talk about. First was the trip you took with your daughter and your dad to Italy. I mean, speaking of things that are meant to be and fortuitous too, can you please talk a little about how you prepared for that trip?
I prepared for it. Well, I guess we have to go back to about 4 years ago. Well, first of all, my grandfather is from a tiny little village about 45 minutes north of Rome called Canapina. And it's very small. And people just have very simple lives there. And it's kind of beautiful. But my grandfather met my grandmother. They settled in New Jersey. They had my father and my uncles and aunt. And we would go back. And in fact, I have my Italian citizenship, which is a nice thing to have in my back pocket. So anyway, but then about 4 years ago, my father got diagnosed with cancer, AML, which is blood cancer. And so anyway, that was a whole process of like over 2 years of treatments, essentially, and some dips and peaks and valleys in his recovery. Then he was basically, they said he was cured of it, which was amazing.
Oh
And
gosh,
so
that must have been a big day when you
that
that
was great. And so then I have my daughter half the time. I co-parent with her mother, and she was going to be on spring break, and I had a week. That's how we split up our time with co-parenting. So it was my week last year, and I saw that it was going to be Easter, and I invited my dad to come with me and my daughter, and we did it, and we had like just an absolutely beautiful week of those two connecting, my daughter and my father. They were already very, very close, but this really sealed it. And all these relatives were fawning over both of them. It was very cute. I just sat back and watched the whole thing, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And yes, as you said, on Easter, there were 68 relatives. We basically rented out a restaurant in town, and it was just amazing. We got a big group photo. And then, as fate would have it, literally on the flight back to LA from Rome, my father's health quickly deteriorated. Just like that. It was very weird, and he never slept in his bed again. He was in the hospital for 2 months, and then he passed away on June 9th. And it was like, I mean, it wasn't like that, and in a way it was okay that there were these months where I got to be mentally prepared. I said goodbye to him 7 times, in those 2 months, because I didn't know if he was going to come out of whatever the next ailment was. So anyway, that ended up being like a very, very special trip, for that reason, and it was an amazing trip with him. And so, and it was very nice, while my dad was still alive and in the hospital, He said that he doesn't regret going for a second. He wouldn't change a thing. He had a great time. So yeah, that was that story. I'm literally, you can't see this, but I'm sitting in front of piles of administrative work that I'm still doing in the aftermath of his passing, because, as you mentioned, my only sibling experiences autism. And it is, he's not able to help in this way. He's got his own challenges that he deals with. So, and that autism is a big part of my character, my family's character, how I view the world, how I also find I kind of am drawn to the mysteries of world and things that aren't explained and coincidences and things like that, because I grew up with living, breathing mystery in my life, with not knowing what was going on. And so, yeah, now, as you were saying, we know with 100% clarity that my brother, not only does he understand everything, he's kind of a genius, because he's been spelling, but which that actually is the slowest part of this phase of his life is him. It requires a lot of effort for him to spell on a spelling board, which is how he's doing it now. He has to take breaks. It's very taxing on his eyes and his brain. So, but no, he told me the other day, or no, he didn't tell me. He told his roommate, who is also like a family member to me. He's a J. Nolan employee, Troy. He's often asked a question in his spelling classes, and the facilitator said, if you could spend your life savings on one thing, what would it be? And apparently my brother said, if I could spend my life savings on one thing, it would be seeing live music. So we're definitely related.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I would have done it anyway, but I found tickets to a tribute band that was playing up near where he lived, and I took him, and I plan on doing a lot more of that, because now I know, and I can't wait to know him. He is the only person on the planet that knows what my home life was like growing up, and what his home life, what our home life was like. And it is like the idea of having any deeper relationship than the one I've had with him is just, you may as well tell me, hey, did you know your brother can levitate and
Wow.
fly? Did you know your brother could fly to the moon? It is that far out to me.
Wow.
Yeah. So and my father got to he had that knowledge before he passed away, and my father made it happen. And my father had a magic to him too, that even though he was a very logical guy, unexplainable things happened with this guy, and he made that happen. We basically were told that this one facilitator that was local to us, like the other closest one is in San Diego, and some people do drive all the way to San Diego. Anyway, we ended up miraculously getting sessions with this woman who is an angel in our lives, this woman, Debbie, and the program is called Spell to Communicate, S2, the number 2, C. And this woman and this program they presume competence.
They presume competence.
They presume competence, which a lot of social workers in that field hadn't ever done. They presumed incompetence, with my brother. And it's just incredible. And yeah, my father got to experience watching my brother type long words, orchestra, perfectly. And it's just been absolutely a game changer.
Wow.
Yeah, I
So,
know.
so going back in time,
Yeah.
when you were seven, right? You were expecting a
Yeah.
sibling, and what was that like, getting to know your brother as he was?
Well, I am the firstborn of my parents, and they are the firstborn of their sibling groups. And I modeled what it is to be the oldest sibling from them. And so 7 years later, when I knew I was going to be the oldest sibling, I got very excited and I took it very seriously. And, there's pictures of me holding my brother as a baby, and I can just see how serious I am. And, and it was like that for, the first 2 years until speech never came. And there was a lot of crying from him, like screaming, and we shared a bedroom. And it was like, this doesn't feel like what anyway, he got diagnosed around that time. And by the way, speaking of where the science and the technology has come since then, a doctor told my mother that autism is caused by the mother being cold.
No.
Yeah.
Holy
So,
cow. No.
yeah. So that's what my mother was, dealing with on top of raising a kid with special needs. That it
That's
was
so
her fault.
extremely frustrating.
It's ridiculous.
It's horrible.
And yeah, and now look at where we are. And even some of the staff in my brother's life now were very leery about spell to communicate. Yeah, you can try, but I don't know. And they have all had the Kool-Aid, because it works. I'm here to tell you, I watched it work. Never thought I would see my brother communicate. So anyway, I'm just saying, even the best intentioned folks in the field can get it wrong.
Yeah, life is constantly evolving and expanding, and so it's fairly easy to get it wrong, even with the best of intention.
Yeah, it's true.
So as a kid, and it's strange to me that I haven't asked you more about this, but how did you fall in love with playing instruments?
Well, my father was a big music fan, and he had a guitar. My parents were hippies from the 60s, and they, my father and mother, saw a lot of live music before I was born, and then after I was born. It was just music was a part of the household. He had a guitar.
Did either of them play instruments?
Yeah, my father did. And basic guitar chords. Nothing. He was more of a singer though. And when he had bands, he would be the singer. And he was a great singer, actually. My mother was just a fan, but she had a little broader spectrum of taste. My father was it was great. He had a broad spectrum, but whatever it was mostly roots music, and it was also really authentic. He was like, he loved anything from New Orleans. He loved blues. He loved Cuban music. Things that had deep roots. That's the kind of thing he loved. He loved gospel. He loved early country, things like that. Not a lot of artifice, he couldn't care less if, something took a year to record because listen to that sound, that wasn't his thing. But my mother was more into like pop. And so through her, I got into Hall & Oates and the Doobie Brothers and, that kind of stuff that was going on.
When did you realize you had talent playing instruments?
Yeah, I know. I was probably around 5 when I picked up the guitar, and then I would say I was 7 when I started like writing songs. And actually it was cute. My father hooked me up with 2 of the old-fashioned like little desktop tape decks, like a tape recorder, that would have a little microphone. And we kind of, for us, we invented multi-track recording, because so on one, on tape deck number 1, I would hit record and play, and I would sing a song and play, and sing and play. And then I would play that back while recording the speaker of that on the next one and sing along and play with that, like a different part or whatever, or a different instrument. So I was always drawn to recording and music and the culture of records. I have a problem with collecting records, borderline addiction. I have a lot of albums in my life, but
if I had asked you in high school what you wanted to do with your life, would you have said you wanted to be a musician?
Yeah, absolutely. But and this is where it gets complicated.
But the K-Mart portrait studio was calling your name.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, no, this is where it gets complicated because and I know other siblings of folks with disabilities have gone through this, where I felt an unspoken pressure to be normal. And I wasn't wired normal. I was wired to be a roving troubadour musician, recording artist, writer, the things that you didn't need a college degree for. But my parents had, they were very well intentioned, but they were like, no, we're going to pay for college and we want you to go to college and that's it. End of story. And so I skated by. I wasn't a good student. I was daydreaming all the time, looking out the window.
So you didn't really care about. You
I
didn't
really
want to
didn't.
be there.
I really did not care about college. I got a degree. And there were things I liked about it. But also the other thing that I decided on, I said, you know what? All right, if I'm gonna go, I want to go to school in New York. And so I went to a commuter school, New York Institute of Technology. And it wasn't the frat campus life that a lot of my peers had. I didn't live away. I still lived with my parents. And I took the bus into New York City every day. And, it put hair on my chest, so to speak, because I started in 1989. And I know it's probably hard to believe, but New York City, Times Square, Port Authority in 1989 was messy and it was dangerous and scary if you weren't used to it. I used to, my survival mechanism that I came up with was when I would either get off the bus or get off the subway to the bus at the end of the day, I would check my watch and run through Port Authority as if I were presenting to be late for my bus, when in fact I was just wanting to get through there as fast as possible because I would get harassed and, tried to get shaken down for money. And, I was never officially mugged, but I would get harassed. And, there were weirdos like living in Port Authority at that time. And then years later, it got cleaned up and it got cleaned up and I got used to it. I knew how to have a deadpan face and don't bother me look. But that's the kind of thing that you can't teach someone. You have to just figure that out on your own. And so I did. But anyway, my point is that my real education, honestly, was going to New York City every day and people watching. And it sounds crazy, but I got more out of that than any class that I took in college.
Did you have a band during college? I mean, were you in a band during college?
Yes, that was you were kind enough. Yeah, well, you were nice enough to mention Lizard Music, which was my first band. And this was the 90s and we were playing a show on the Jersey Shore and we were, we had a healthy draw. Like we could probably get 50 to 100 people to come see us every time. And so we would be the opening act for a touring band. We ended up opening for a band, and the bass player in that band actually just passed away last week. His name was Dave Allen. He was in a really interesting band called the Gang of Four in the 70s and 80s. And they kind of invented a style of, they call it post-punk. But they were their own thing. Anyway, this guy, Dave Allen, had a record label. And he signed Lizard Music to this label. And there was real money to be spent on our band. And we went to Chicago and we recorded with a guy, Steve Albini, who he had just recorded Nirvana's In Utero album. He was a big deal. Yeah, and we stayed at his house, and then we went on tour, and we went to England, and we ended up putting out 3 albums on this label. And then the whole industry kind of changed, and that's a whole other story. But that was my Lizard Music experience, and that kind of just fell into our laps, which was kind of in keeping with a lot of things that happen in my life.
So you didn't stay on the music track after that. You went into social services.
Exactly.
What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, it's my one regret in life, because to put it bluntly, and it's a lot more complicated than this, but I kind of gave up. I got depressed about music, because I got close to having the kind of gratification that I wanted and thought I was deserving of. And then I got close, and then it went away. And I just said, you know what? Well, I also needed a job. Like nothing was happening. So I needed a job, and my father was a social worker, and he had connections. And so he said, hey, if you need a job, they're hiring for the group home at ARC, which was it's a national organization, but this was in New Jersey, Monmouth ARC. And so, yeah, I started working in group homes.
Were you playing in a band during the time you were?
Not really. Occasionally I would do something, or yeah, occasionally, but no, I would say no.
Did you miss playing music during that time?
I did, but I didn't even have any concept of how to have it back in my life again. And also my band was breaking up, and like there was like bad blood, and it just was like just went all crumbled pretty quickly. And
So how
yeah, I
did
just did
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, well, you were just cutting out. I think I was done talking, but you also froze.
Oh shoot. So then what precipitated you getting back into music?
What got me back into it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had worked, I want to say like 7 years doing social work stuff. I ended up running a supported employment program for folks with mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia, things like that, who wanted to get back into the workforce. So I did that in New York. And while I was doing that, it was interesting because I was not feeling great about this, that, and the other thing. I decided to go to a therapist. And the therapy was costing me about $150 a month. And at the same time, an opportunity came up to go half with a friend on a basement studio to just rehearse and make noise, and we had it, and that was $150. And I thought, you know what, I want to take the $150 that I'm using on therapy and put it towards my actual therapy, like something that I know is going to make me feel better, just playing music. So that's what I did. And then I like started writing songs again because I had a space to have a band. And when you have a band in your life and you're prone to writing songs, you have a thing to write for. There's a framework, oh, well, we're going to practice next Tuesday. We need songs to do. I have some songs. So, and then it feeds itself. It's, when you're the leader of a band, so that's how I got back into it again. Just living in New York and knowing music people. And I mean, just literally casting a line into, sometimes it would be, I don't even know if Craigslist was around back then. Maybe it was. I don't know. This is early 2000s. But yeah, I had like several iterations of my band, which I still have. It's called the Paparozzi, if anyone wants to look into it. I have a couple. Yeah. And then, yeah, so while I was in New York, actually, here's another kind of cool happenstance thing that really changed my life, which is, so unfortunately, I have had phases of my life where I have been a cigarette smoker. And I was in one of those phases, and I had gone to a party at my friend's place, which was in upstate New York from New York City. So I had to take a bus up there. It was like 2 to 3 hours away. And I went up there that night. There was a big party. I drank a lot and I smoked a lot of cigarettes. And in fact, I smoked all of my cigarettes. So I was out of cigarettes, hungover, and had taken a 3-hour bus ride home. And when I got out of the bus, I couldn't. Oh, it was the day of the New York City Marathon.
Wow.
And so the subways were all wacky. So I had to get out and walk through Central Park, so gross and so bad. And I like wanted a cigarette, but then I was like, now this was like 2, 3, 4 p.m. And I'm like, well, maybe if I went one day, I can like quit today. And also that day, because I had to walk through Central Park, and I passed the marathon, and it was like 100,000 of the healthiest people who were like, it was like a case study. Which one of these people is taking care of themselves? The guy who just smoked a pack of cigarettes last night, or the person running the New York City Marathon? Anyway, I get home. Now it's 4, 5, 6 at night. Okay, maybe I can do this. So that night, I had a friend from LA call me up and say, hey, I'm in New York. I'm working with a band, and they're playing tonight. Why don't you come? So I go. Still hadn't had a cigarette. And I end up meeting this guy, Jimmy. And Jimmy was in a band with a guy named Judah Bauer, who ended up being a major figure in my life. And he said, yeah, we have a show coming up, but we don't have a bass player. Like, you don't play bass, do you? And I said, yeah, I can play bass. And by the way, at that time, I didn't own a bass, but something in me told me to say yes. And so I said yes. And by the end of the week, I had learned all of this band songs. They were called 20 Miles. And this guy, Judah Bauer, and I became close friends. And he is the one who got me into the Cat Power band, which I'm still in to this day. And that completely changed my life and, gave my music career legitimacy. And, I've played all the major venues in the world, and it's a big part of my identity. And it all happened this day that I quit smoking. And
Wow.
it was like this, it was a transfer of karma somehow. And that was, anyway, that's that story.
So, please talk about the day you decided to leave, or you left with a friend from New York and headed out to LA.
Yeah. Okay, so in the year 2005, I was in a major transition period. I was separating from my first wife in New York City, and I still had a blind faith that music there was still something in the tank for me with music, with no connections and no anything other than blind faith. And I had a friend who felt the same way. And he was in a period of transition as well. And the two of us so in 2005, we planned on, okay, let's just save our pennies and let's go to Los Angeles. And our
so this
plan was to just...
Was this after the cigarette day?
Sorry. Oh yeah, this is after the cigarette day, but before Cat Power. So I was just I was just still not settled yet with things, but I was, I use the term turning a ship around, because that's what it felt like. Very slow, trying to just be pointed into the unknown, but in the right direction. And who knows what the right direction is, but I just knew the direction I was on wasn't the right direction. And so something about LA was calling me and my friend. And so on New Year's Eve, 2005 into 2006, my friend was a bartender, and we spent that day loading up his van, put it in a parking garage. I went with him to work his shift at the bar. I wasn't working, but it was New Year's Eve in New York City. It was, it was a busy night for him. So he worked about 4 or 5 in the morning. He shut the big gate in front of the bar, and we got in the car and started driving to LA. And we didn't stop, by the way. We were so excited but towards the end, we ended up doing 4-hour shifts. And we were just the second our 4-hour shift was up, the other one would take over, and you would just crash for 4 hours. And then we kept doing it. We drove straight from New York to LA. No, we didn't get a hotel room. I don't even think we sat in a restaurant. I really don't. We were just so determined to get this chapter going. and it was amazing. So we spent a year out here, and it was in that year that you mentioned the karaoke band. Again, I was just out here. I didn't have any connections. I went on Craigslist and I saw an ad for a bass player wanted for a live karaoke band. And it said, you have to know how to play lots of different styles of music. And I just thought, oh my God, like I can definitely do this. Like, and I knew I was going to get it, and I got it. They told me after I got it, they were like, yeah, the second we saw you, like we knew you were the guy. So, and that was really, to this day, it's my favorite chapter of my life in music, because it was the first time I truly was paying my way through life by the money I was making doing music. And I had never done that before. I had always had to have another job, or was living at my parents', or was sharing, the expenses with someone. It was incredible. It was an amazing feeling that, like, I'm very proud of. And so, yeah, we had this weekly thing that turned out to be a note, as, if you were inclined to sing karaoke, well, here's a live band, and you bring your friends, and, you put your name on the list and you get called up, and there's lyrics there and a great band. And through the karaoke band, I ended up meeting a guy. I actually just had breakfast with him yesterday, named David Steinberg, who, again, this is like, it's so funny how things work out. So I'm living in LA. I'm playing in a live karaoke band. Through that, I meet this guy, David, who at that time was doing, basic cable reality shows, stuff on Bravo. And this is in the early 2000s. And he would call me in because he knew I played a lot of instruments. And he'd pay me a couple $100 to, like, play bass on this thing, play acoustic guitar on that thing, sing on this. I would, and again, I was making money doing music. That guy, David, we ended up doing, as you said before, I think I've done like 7 episodes of RuPaul's Drag Race, where there's something in that universe called a rusical, which is, it's a competition show. So the drag queens have to perform, it's usually like a 12 to 15 minute long medley that we had to do all the music for. It's a very high stress TV environment, which is different than the world of music. And you're working in TV, there's deadlines, there's 8 writers, there's producers, there's deadlines, and this has to be done now, it has to be done yesterday. It's that kind of thing. But that was a great experience, getting to do that stuff. I was on the set. I was actually on the show, one episode where they had, me and my partner David coaching the drag queens. That was on the Madonna themed rusical, which is really funny. See me up there. Anyway, I'm rambling, but this is all to say that my career is rambling and my life is rambling, and I'm just rambling on, and I still don't know what's next. But I just have a blind faith that something's out there, something else.
So you went from the New Year's Eve closing up the bar with your friend and driving for
Yeah.
days to LA. And what were you doing the next New Year's Eve?
That's right. Yeah, I forgot to get to that part. Um, so yeah, during that year, this guy Judah, that I would have never met if I didn't go out the day I quit smoking that day, he called me from New York. He said, "Hey, I'm putting together a band for the singer Cat Power. Would you have any interest in being a part of it?" And again, it was a similar feeling to when I played bass in his band. I didn't even know who. I had heard of this singer Cat Power, but it was not something. I just said yes right away. Yeah, I want to do that. um and so that was around September that I got the call of 2006. November 2006, we rehearsed in New York for one day. Then 2 weeks later, we went to Europe. My first show with Cat Power was this thing called the Primavera Festival, which is a huge festival. And then we played, real big theaters. When I say big, let's say 1,200 seat, like definitely the biggest venues I had ever played. So all of a sudden, here I am. So that was November, December, early December. And then they're like, "Oh, hey, the Flaming Lips and Gnarls Barkley want to know if Cat Power can open up New Year's Eve and New Year's Eve Eve." So Eve was in San Francisco and New Year's Eve was in LA. And yes, so exactly 1 year ago, my friend and I got into his van and drove to LA with absolutely no plan. And at the end of that year, I was on stage at like the biggest concert of the year. That year, that band Gnarls Barkley was huge. They had a song Crazy. I don't know if you remember that band or that song, but it was a big song. It was like the song of the year. And here I was, just right in the heart of it. It felt like I was Zelig or something, you know?
You felt like you were what?
Oh, Zelig is a Woody Allen movie where the character blends into whatever social group he's in. It's kind of a catch-all word for someone who just blends in and ends up in these, or like a Forrest Gump, basically, that kind of.
Nice.
That's how I felt.
So as we get towards the end, what were you? So many people, including me at times, are so concerned about making success happen
Yeah.
in our lives. What would you say to people who have that concern / obsession?
I would say, don't define success as financial success, first of all. Just take that off the table, because, well, I mean, unless you're a stockbroker or someone who like is out to, if that's your thing, to make money. And there are people who are great at it, and I don't begrudge them. But if you are, I think you gotta just really enjoy every small victory, and you have to keep at it. I once actually took an acting class. I didn't take the class. I ended up not taking it. But the facilitator up front, he said, I was talking to another actor friend of mine, and I honestly think the most important thing you can do as an artist is just stick around, because something will happen. And that really stuck with me. And it's why I regretted not doing music for those years. Although I grew in other ways when I was doing social work. And it was a way to connect with that side of my family and my brother. And, it didn't not make sense, if that makes sense. But I think, honestly, you just gotta stay in the game and keep doing your thing and take gratification from just doing it, and also work with whatever you have in front of you. When I've often had to, when I agreed to play bass, I didn't own a bass at that time. But I figured it out. I borrowed one, and I'm like, okay, here I am with my bass. I'm not trying to brag here, but I have been able to work at a certain level the past 15, 20 years. But still, my favorite era was when I was making $300 a week in a live karaoke band, because I was so that was so gratifying to me. And I think, as long as you can find gratification, personal gratification somehow, doesn't matter what size it is or what level you're at, I think that's success.
That's a great answer. Thanks. Last question. I made sure I talk a lot about doing our imperfect best. To me, doing my imperfect best means I envision the best I want for myself and to create for the world around me, and I go towards that. But when mistakes and obstacles come up, instead of using those imperfections as reasons to quit, I try to learn from all that and move again towards the best I envision. What does doing your imperfect best mean to you?
Imperfect best is my baseline, honestly. I really, friends often tease me about this, but I really sometimes feel like I'm winging it. like one of these days people are gonna catch on, hey, did you notice Erik doesn't really know what he's doing here? I do know what I'm doing, but I think, now I know this is gonna sound like a rationalization, but my personal take is that it's almost better to not know what you're doing sometimes, or not have a rule book, or you didn't read the rule book if there is a rule book, and because you're just kind of figuring it out on your own, and believe me, it's imperfect. But Salvador Dali said one of my favorite things of all time, and I use it. I say this a lot. He says, "Do not be afraid of perfection. you will never attain it. So that's kind of my motto. And he was someone who created, masterworks.
Yeah.
But, we all have our version of perfection. It's overrated.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for saying yes to all these different opportunities in your life, and savoring all the serendipities, and thanks for being you. And please, this is important. Please stay on as I end the show, okay? It needs to wrap up. And thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. None of us know all the answers to what our lives are going to become, but Eric's story is so inspiring because it reminds us yet again that we don't need to know all the answers to live an abundant life and to walk into things that are beyond our imagination. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in for another episode with a guest or multiple guests next week. Until then, you are the best. Thanks for being you.